with the expansion of AI and, obviously you cannot have a conversation about e-commerce or digital today without AI getting into the mix. But I really think there's this world that we're going to go into where it is a more personalized concierge experience than it is a place where you're asking somebody to go into basically a digital recreation of a physical space. You need to go find your product. You need to kind of down select, where it's going to be more of working with somebody to understand their needs and to a degree already have an understanding of some of their needs or their potential action, being proactive and working with them in a more one-to-one. I see a world where you come into an e-commerce site and there is no navigation.
Welcome to the Ecommerce Toolbox, Expert Perspectives, a podcast by Noibu, where we explore the elite strategies and cutting-edge insights with our expert guests. Get ready to propel your e-commerce business to the next level.
Welcome to the Ecommerce Toolbox Experts Perspective. Joining us today, we have Owen Spencer, who is a director of digital, has a ton of experience on the retailer and agency side. So welcome, Owen. Really excited to have you on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Kailin. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. I always like to start off by learning a bit about your career journey. Like I alluded to, you've worked both at the retailer level and then kind of gone through various different agencies, specifically in the SFCC world. And now you, like I mentioned, are the director of digital applications at Fox Racing. So maybe talk to us a bit about that career journey and some of the things you learned along that way.
Yeah, for sure. So I feel really lucky to have a pretty eclectic background. So, e-commerce was never really a thing that I had my eyes set on and was really a big passion of mine. Really, my background was in psychology, business, and art is really kind of how I got to where I am today. And over the years, just kind of dabbled in a lot of different areas, fine art, graphic design, ended up in web design. And as part of kind of going through the schooling for web design, really trying to get a firm understanding of how do I take my vision that I've designed, and then how does it get handed off, or how does it actually physically get built by a developer? And through that transition and that learning, I started to learn code. So, started rudimentary programmatic thinking with languages like Python. This was the world where, everything was, getting into animations and really understanding like what all the capabilities out there were. As part of that, I kind of took that, was doing a lot of freelance work with just smaller mom and pop companies, and just got really lucky living. I'm in Portland, Oregon. We have a lot of huge e-commerce brands here. One of them being Columbia Sportswear. And I was just really lucky and grateful to be able to secure a position there, working as a front-end developer, and had an amazing team that took me under their wings and really allowed me to grow, gain a lot of knowledge, and really, dive into the deep end. You talk about Columbia Sportswear being a global, and at that time it was 3 brands, maybe 4, continue to grow. So I really got a kind of a front seat of how the big brands do it. But then after a number of years, I really wanted to just have a little bit more diversity in my day-to-day. I wanted to see how other brands were approaching their problems, what solutions were out there, and was able to sync up with a couple of folks at the ground level and start up a commerce cloud-focused agency called Demand PDX here in Portland. Was there for a number of years, worked with a ton of different brands, ranging from, really small boutique to massive globally known, outdoor retailer apparel companies, multi-tool companies, fine jewelry, furniture. So I really got a crash course in all of the different needs that these businesses have. And then over time, kind of worked there, worked at another SFCC agency, Red Van Workshop, phenomenal team over there. Also got to kind of see how other agencies work. But really for me, I wanted to get back into the brand side. So, working B2B at Melissa and Doug, also on Salesforce, but more on the core platform. So kind of gave me that behind the scenes of, Salesforce Commerce Cloud versus Salesforce Core and where they're similar and where they're different. And now, really happy to be originally at Fox Racing, now Revelist, overseeing adventure sports digital experience across a number of outdoor brands.
I love it. What a background. Through that, obviously, you've had to talk a lot about with your clients and as an operator, working on basically having data-driven and then sometimes data-informed decisions. So maybe talk to us a bit about what the difference is there and some of your philosophies around that and how you've brought that into organizations that you've partnered with.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it can kind of feel like splitting hairs when you get into these two terms because they sound very similar. And like the clear way that I like to explain that when I'm talking to folks is data driven would be blindly following the data that you're seeing, and data informed would be using that data as a piece to your decision. Working with a lot of different brands in a lot of different sizes and capacities, I've seen both ends of that spectrum where you have folks where these massive organizations where you're not changing anything on there unless you have this full data report that shows, we've quantified this is going to be the lift. Even if it's minimal, we're going to go ahead and follow it, but you don't make any changes unless you have that really secure data point. I've also worked with those brands where it's the opposite, where we're driving purely by gut, or, worst case is it's the loudest voice gets the decision that's made. And we've all been on those websites, right? Where you're not really sure what's going on. Things are popping up. It doesn't feel like a cohesive journey. It's because, those decisions that have been made have really been made from the hunch of, I've seen this on a website. I've done this in the past. I think this resonates with me. So the idea of really having the data informed decision is taking both of those and kind of combining them for the best balance. So we're taking those data points. We don't want to just blindly make decisions, but we also know that not everything can be measured. And even the things that can be measured, it's not always the entire story. So taking those and we combine them with, here's some data that we've gathered. And then how do we apply that to maybe a hypothesis that we have or a problem that we're trying to solve? And then we can still analyze the data as we go forward, but we're not just blindly following it. A great example I would give of that, we've all seen kind of the stories of it of, man drives into lake following his, Google Maps, right? So it's got that same kind of idea as, it's trust but verify, and kind of using that as a piece to the puzzle, but knowing, when you need to hit the brakes and not drive into that lake.
I love that. And I think you mentioned various different stakeholders and having to kind of balance what the user wants, what the marketing team wants, maybe what the agency thinks is the right idea. Maybe talk to us a bit about some of the tactics around balancing user feedback, and then maybe pairing that with leveraging user data, and then obviously some of your own knowledge to kind of build the best digital experience.
Yeah, for sure. For me, at the end of the day, it all comes down to the people. And it's really hard, especially in the modern digital age where we have all of these data points, we have all these very complex systems. At the end of the day, there's a person behind all of these things. And so when we talk about, oftentimes it will be, it's the C-suite and it's marketing and it's brand and it's dev. But really, there's a marketing person that has this, or a team that has this vision. And at the core, I'm a firm believer that we're really all trying to do the best with what we have. And so when marketing might come and they say, we have this objective, and here's how we're thinking about achieving it. Really, the tactics that I use are putting myself in their shoes and really understanding authentically where they're coming from, the position that they're in, what they're trying to achieve, and then taking that and repeating that through all the folks that are involved in that. So we might have a solution that we're trying to solve, and the C-suite has an objective or a goal they're trying to achieve. Marketing has one, the user has one, the brand has one. Being able to kind of sit in those in true authenticity and take a step back and understand and mentally I kind of create these Venn diagrams of where these things overlap. And then using that background of working with a lot of different brands and sizes and objectives to say, okay, here's the tactics that we can use to meet the goals and the needs in a balanced way for all of those stakeholders. I think a great example, and this is going to seem like, this is from years ago, but I think it's a really solid one, and it's kind of, standard at these points. But, working back with a sports apparel brand, their marketing team, big push was, hey, we want registered users. We want to be able to get this data. We want them on our marketing list. That's our number one objective because we want to continue that brand conversation. Then taking that in, from the e-commerce team, they were looking at it and saying, hey, our goal is, how we are judged on success is, are we hitting those revenue numbers? Is our conversion rate at this point that our C-suite expects it to be? That executive team is looking at all of those things and saying, okay, is this operating in the way that we think is efficient and moving the business forward? But really kind of going back to the user. So what we saw was one of the tactics that was being used is you've brought this person into the journey, you've marketed them to your site, you get them to add a product to the cart, they're in the cart, and you go into your checkout, and you're immediately met with this wall that said, register for your account. And then below it was, don't want to register for account, you want to go into your guest checkout. And their perspective was that, hey, we want to capture this person, they might fall off during checkout, and we want to be able to gather that information so that we can market to them, we can retarget. But what we were seeing was there was a massive drop off that was happening between that moving into the checkout experience because they were being hit with this page. And one of the reasons was, especially on mobile, the first thing you were seeing was register for account. So what folks were seeing is they were coming in here and saying, to make a purchase, I have to register an account. I have to create a password. I have to do all of these things. So what we did is we took a step back and said, hey, let's try removing this step and moving folks straight into the checkout. Marketing team, we know that you still need that data 100%. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to move some of those fields earlier into the checkout process so you can still capture that. And then we're also going to get a really clean and user-friendly way at the end of that experience for that user to convert who's now made their purchase into a registered user. So we're still meeting the needs of the business, but we're also putting the user first and saying, right now, they have something in the cart, they want to make that purchase. How do we make that a smooth transition as possible while still meeting the needs and objectives of those other stakeholders? And I think and now I look at it, working with that brand at that time, I've taken that, applied it to a lot of others. And now it's pretty much the standard, right? Like if you go into any checkout, very few are going to give you that step. And if they do, they're going to lead with guest checkout, which I think is that shift that we've seen over the years.
Yeah. And one thing that you said, I just want to kind of take it. It sounds like you kind of perfected it and then added it to other websites as well. So obviously people are looking at their competition when it comes to making some of these decisions. So maybe talk to us a bit about where you think it could be maybe good to look at your competition, and maybe in some other cases where looking at your competition is maybe not good and it could be actually distracting to what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, I really think it's always good to understand what your competition is doing. It's good to at least have that understanding. The area where I see brand commonly falling into pitfalls is seeing there's a competitor in the space and maybe they're the benchmark, maybe that's the gold standard that we're reaching towards, and you see them do something. You don't know why they're doing it. You don't know if it's successful, right? You're just seeing that they're doing it. And so what will happen is, especially working with a lot of those like mid-tier brands that are really trying to get to the next level, they'll look at these behemoths in the space and say, Nike does this, so it must work. And what they're not understanding there fully is that, yes, that might be a competitor to yours because you're both in sports or activewear. And so you're looking at kind of the tactics that they're using to be successful. But at the end of the day, you really don't know the reason as to why. What was all the stakeholder information that came in there? What was the output? And does it even work for them? And so I like to, when working with brands and working with teams, either from, design objectives, development, marketing, we look at it, but we also want to understand, okay, great. Now that we have kind of this information about how our users are maybe going through these digital experiences, there might be things that we see, hey, commonalities that, we want to make sure that we have those pieces. We're not breaking the mold for the sake of breaking the mold, but then also saying, okay, how do we take that as a way to inform our decisions? Again, going back to that data-driven piece is, okay, we're taking that now, look at the problems or the objectives that we have as an organization. And there might be pieces of that actually align really well with what we're trying to do, but we're not just going and doing it blindly because we saw it. I've worked with a lot of brands where we did this filter menu because we saw it on this big brand. And it's like, great. Well, I've worked with that big brand. That filter menu doesn't work. You probably saw that. And then 2 weeks later, they took it down. But now you've invested all of this development and design resources, and you're always kind of chasing. And so you'll see you build this thing and then it moves on you. Build this thing and it moves on you. And if you're always just kind of replicating what somebody else is do, you'll always be playing catch up and you'll never be a leader in that space.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, look, if you're just going to copy, and you obviously, it takes time to catch up. And then by the time you catch up, you realize that that's not what you wanted to do in the first place. And
totally.
With that said, like as you're seeing kind of web development and design trends start to evolve in the form of more people are going headless and stuff like that. Maybe talk to us a bit about where you think the future is headed.
Yeah, the question that I really love, because I think we're in a really exciting time right now. So we're in this zone where, web design, web development, e-commerce has been around for a long time, right? But what we've seen is we've really gone through kind of like these big core changes, and where you get a lot of sites that are using the same tactics. And now we're at this spot where we're able to kind of pick and choose. I think about it similar to fashion, right? Where you have all of these styles that have happened over many years and decades, and you're able to kind of pull those, be like, right now we're in kind of a 90s phase, right? We're kind of pulling those pieces together, but then we're maybe mixing them with pieces from the 2000s or from the 50s. So I think we're in that spot right now where we've built, especially in e-commerce, we've built this really kind of massive kit of parts, strategies, approaches that now these brands, these design teams are able to kind of take from that inspiration and piece them together to make really unique experiences. What I've kind of seen is, obviously headless is huge right now. So that's a big push for organization. I think there's also a lot of brands that are sitting there saying, is now the time? Like, do I get into it now? Is it the right time? What does this look like? For me, the future of e-commerce web design is really a full tilt. It's taking, this kind of standard. You drive into an e-commerce site, you have 1,000 categories you're selecting from, you're picking your category, you're getting into your filter. I, for the most part, see that going away in the next 5 to 10 years. And it will happen at different paces for different brands and different organizations. But really, with the expansion of AI and, obviously you cannot have a conversation about e-commerce or digital today without AI getting into the mix. But I really think there's this world that we're going to go into where it is a more personalized concierge experience than it is a place where you're asking somebody to go into basically a digital recreation of a physical space. You need to go find your product. You need to kind of down select, where it's going to be more of working with somebody to understand their needs and to a degree already have an understanding of some of their needs or their potential actions, being proactive and working with them in a more one-to-one. I see a world where you come into an e-commerce site and there is no navigation, right? Like that you're kind of going in and it's more of, what are you looking for? What brought you here today? And it's more of, walking into, a really nice retail space and, you're not looking for the signs because that associate has already come up to you. Oh, I'm going on this trip. I need to find the right gear for this temperature. They're working with you. They're finding your fit. And so I think the difference, getting into the way that you find those products, the way that those products are going to be creative. I think, some of the advancements we've seen in personalization, customization, and not just in hard goods, but in apparel is going to absolutely change the way that we shop in the future. I think we'll be getting into more personalized fit on product, where, a lot right now it's fitting into these sizes or fitting into these colorways, where it's going to be more of a personalized experience where maybe it's, you're not buying a size medium shirt, you're buying Kailin's shirt and it's the fit that you like. And so obviously that's not going to happen overnight. There's a lot of investment that has to happen there. But I think that's the direction that we're going, especially when you look at those brands and organizations that are on the cutting edge. We wanted to kind of look and learn from them. I think some of us may have looked, especially during, 2020, looking at, metaverse is everybody's going to be shopping in the metaverse in 3 years. And like, that's going to be the goal. And like, sure, maybe that's still where it's going to be, but I still think there's going to be this shift where we're going to see just the human interaction, blending those things together, and then also decoupled from just your website experience. It's the way you interact with an ad when you're walking to the subway. It's the way, obviously, that's already happening with social and with marketplaces. But I think it's going to be more about that brand being of service to you when and where you need them in the way that you demand, rather than the brand kind of putting that work on you.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I think we're already seeing elements of that on certain websites and in how, like with like digital agents and some investments. And instead of just having someone there for support, having them there kind of as a brand ambassador is what I've heard them being referred to as sometimes.
For sure. As
we look to wrap up, Owen, I'm curious from your standpoint, obviously you've had various different roles and now you're in quite a senior role. Do you have any final piece of advice or takeaway for people that are maybe a bit earlier in their career that are looking to kind of climb the ranks and make an impact?
Yeah, for sure. I think listening is so powerful, right? Like, and I think that, and I was guilty of this early in my career. There was this, you gain a little bit of expertise, and then there's like this desire to prove to everybody that you have this expertise, right? And so you always want to challenge or, give your 2 cents in. But I think my most powerful tool that I kind of bring to the table is being able to listen to all of those different stakeholders and understand kind of really where they're coming from, and really kind of removing your judgment from those moments. Our brain is so good at filtering data and taking these heuristic shortcuts where we might hear something and then we kind of jump to this conclusion. Being able to take a step back, I'd also say, like, as much as you can, travel, experience other things, right? Like if I look at some of the things that we see on sites now, I was looking at, some of the e-commerce sites years ago that like, this is wild for, these Japanese brands are doing this on their e-commerce site. And that's crazy. Like, and then now we're looking at that and that's becoming the standard. So really not getting locked into just like your your one category. Like if you're working in a certain vertical, maybe branch out and try out some other ones, or work with colleagues to kind of understand where they're coming from. And we're just really lucky, with the amount of information that's out of there, podcasts like this, like there's so much that you can be garnering information from, and like just be a sponge as much as possible. And some of it's not going to matter, but you're really going to get these little gems that if you're able to kind of take a step back and kind of quiet your mind, you can really connect these pieces to create an amazing experience. And especially now at the end of the day, like you have to put the user at the center of your decision making, like full stop. That, these ideas of, or the previous tactics of, we can retarget to you is almost like a trickery. And now like users just expect more, right? They expect an authentic experience. They expect you to, when you make those promises, that you uphold those promises. And really at the end of the day, like everything that we do, like your marketing team, your brand team, your developers, none of that matters without the end user, right? And so you have to put them at the core. And so it's always kind of coming back to that piece. And I think, so if you can take those bits of knowledge and then apply it with that kind of mindset, the sky's the limit.
Love it. Thanks so much for your time, Owen. Fantastic episode. Really, really appreciate your time, and we'll see you again soon.
I really appreciate it, Kailin.
The Ecommerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives is brought to you by Noibu. To find out more about Noibu and how we can help you debug your e-commerce site and rocket your revenue, visit www.noibu.com. That's Noibu.com. And then make sure to search for the Ecommerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found, and click subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Noibu, thanks for listening.